and welcome to today's webcast. There's no doubt that it's an incredibly exciting time to be a marketer. We've got access to state-of-the-art technology, a wealth of tools right at our fingertips, and we're also impacting every single touch point that a customer has interaction with. But boy, is it really getting complex. Along with educating ourselves on the new shiny tools that seem to be popping up daily, we also have to manage our teams, push out content faster than ever before, and sometimes even justify our jobs. With all this going on, we're definitely feeling the pain. Today, I'm joined by Rob Brown, Education Director at Simple. Rob is a well-known keynote speaker, both locally and internationally. He's a high-profile marketing consultant, acquisition expert, and also a board member. Together, we're going to address the top 10 pain points that marketers feel. How are you today, Rob?
I'm very well. Thank you, Sarah, for the intro.
Yes.
Look, and it's a bit of a controversial topic for some marketers.
Yep.
And before we get into the webcast, I want to say that I love marketing. I'm a passionate marketer.
This is an anti-marketing, right? Let's just
absolutely.
Get that straight out of the way.
And look, I really hope that of the couple of hundred people that have signed up for today's webcast, that most of them do work in the marketing department, because, you know, in most organisations, and certainly some of the organisations I've worked in, there are people in accounts, there are people in finance, there are people in procurement who hate marketing and hate marketers as well. Yep. And marketing has been through a bit of an identity crisis, I think, over the last sort of few years, where nobody kind of knows what the marketing department does. Yep. You know, they make the pretty brochure that comes out once a year, but the marketing director and his managers or her managers are always off at product launches or long lunches, and what do they actually, what value do they actually add to the business? And so I think, marketers haven't really had a tool or the tool set, if you like, to justify what they actually do. Yeah. And I think that's part of the identity crisis. And obviously that's changed. And today they do have that, and we'll talk more about that at the end. Yeah. But I think there's never been a better time to be a marketer. There are more channels than we've ever had before, but we're going through a transition, and marketers do need to be more accountable than they've ever been today. Yep. And so I think it's and that transition is causing some pain. And I guess those pain points that we can all experience, are what we're going to talk about today.
Great. So we're going to go through the top 10 pain points. Please feel free to interact with us by asking us questions to do with any type of pain point. I'm going to throw them over to Rob. He's going to do his best to answer them, which I'm sure he will. And also feel free to tweet. The hashtag is on the slides, things I hate about marketing. So number one, spreadsheets. Now, we've got a quote here from people, and it's the whole thing about marketers and spreadsheets, and do they mix, do they work? But what's the issue with marketers and spreadsheets?
Oh, look, I think the issue, Sarah, is it's a left brain, right brain thing. I mean, most marketers are sort of right brain creative types who like to, invent, come up with campaign themes, titles, imagery, and spreadsheets obviously are a logical left brain. They belong very much in that department, and I think not all marketers, but a lot of us have really struggled. Really struggled with just sort of communicating what we're trying to communicate through spreadsheets. And I mean, some of the worst spreadsheets I've ever seen in my life have come from the keyboard of a marketer, sometimes my keyboard. And, you see some spreadsheets, they just make your skin crawl. They'd make Elvis turn in his grave. So I think, and it's a bit like asking, a spreadsheet jockey in the accounts department to come up with a, whiz-bang brochure or flyer, or landing page concept. You can imagine the result. So I think that's where the pain has really...
So what can we do about it? Because I think the reason why marketers do use spreadsheets is because they've got the data there. They need something to put the data on. There's a recent report that actually came out of the US today, and it's the state of marketing. And one of the things that came out of that is only 12% of marketers feel like they're meeting expectations when it comes to justifying what they're doing. So we know what we need to do. We don't have many tools there. The only thing we can use is Excel. So how do we alleviate this pain point?
Well, I think the first thing that most marketers can do is uninstall Excel or stop using Google spreadsheets.
Okay,
now, I know that's a simplified. Of course, you can't do that. But I think, before you brief something in on an Excel spreadsheet, or ask yourself, is there a better tool? Is there another way to do this? And I think there are several cloud-based, centralized marketing calendars that show exactly what's going on. I mean, your marketing plan typically is an Excel spreadsheet. Yep. but there are some awesome tools, and obviously, Simple is has that functionality. We'll talk about that at the end. But it's not just that. I mean, I think if you're moving away from spreadsheets, you can really ensure that your campaigns are sort of on time, on budget, on brand. A spreadsheet is a point in time. It's not a living thing. It's got to be updated, constantly. So I think a web-based solution is one way to avoid that pain point.
Obviously, we can share that around as well, so it's not just you working on something. So I just want to talk about briefing for a little bit, because I think briefing is a huge challenge for a lot of marketers to get right. And I think there's a lot of clarity more often than not, and there's a lot of the times briefs take on this life of their own, essentially. And then you've got the whole, okay, I want you to do this. Well, what's the brief? Oh, let's just make it pretty, or let's just make it sexy, which is what you spoke about before. So this is something we all face every single day, and we've heard at least once, and I can sort of picture people nodding their heads over in webinar land. So what's this all about?
Look, first of all, this is a real pain point for me, and I'm sorry to use a photo of your fiance there, Sarah. Okay. But look, the briefs, I mean, I used to run a big marketing operation for a big education group, and we would have global education. We'd have briefs coming in from all over the world, from Europe and North America and Pakistan and Hong Kong and all these kind of places. And every other day we were getting briefs. Can you just make me a brochure like the one you did last year? Just change the date, and or can you make me a flyer like the competitors have got? But absolutely no details. And the back and forth that is required just to get clarification on what that person actually wants is just a time waster. And it used to eat into the so much of my team's weeks, just sort of seeking clarification on what was actually being required. So that's a real pain point for me.
So obviously we need a pain point, a process then, and obviously we need to communicate that. So what are some tips? Because obviously, like you said, if you are working with an international team, you do get Chinese whispers come through, and it's a lot harder to manage those sort of things. So what are some tips for managing briefs?
Look, I mean, there's a training piece there immediately. And I think a briefing process needs to be non-negotiable. It needs to be template-based. There needs to be a format, and yes, it might take you longer. It might take you 20 minutes to brief in a job or a campaign initially, whereas it takes you 2 minutes or 2 seconds to write can you do me a flyer for the end of the day. But the amount of time that's saved as a result of having that clarity and having those forcing people with obligatory fields that you have to fill in this piece. You can't submit this brief, and you can only really do that through an online form. So I think setting up a briefing form or process for your marketing team, and just force it. There will be some people that will go kicking and screaming down that path. And I've had many conversations, even recently, when talking about Simple with marketing teams, and they'll say, but our teams will never, they just won't do it. Well, they've got to do it, It's who's in charge. And the time saving to the organisation, I think, is certainly from my experience, is significant. So I think you need to synchronize your briefs so that you can store and reuse critical information. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. So do me a flyer like you did last year. Well, you've actually got the brief there in your system. You can just resurface it, make your modifications, and there's a huge time saving there too.
Just want to touch on the training bit and just get your opinion on this. So I think, we can have the best systems in place, but if people aren't actually trained on how to use them properly, then obviously they fall through the cracks. So would you agree that these days it's best not to assume that everyone knows how to write briefs? And I think, that skill of coming into a marketing team and knowing how to write briefs, or even, assuming that people all have marketing degrees or have worked in big teams before, we need to be careful that we don't have that assumption and we actually do provide people with the right training as opposed to letting them just go and figure it out on their own. Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, I think it's to assume that people know how to write briefs is even getting further. I think most, assume that people even know how to write, to communicate their ideas in writing. I mean, most organisations, there are very few people who are really, really good writers. So being able to, communicate what you're trying to communicate that's why I think training and that tight briefing form is absolutely critical. And yes, it's change. It requires some change management. But at the end of the day, if you don't do that, you're going to struggle. You're going to be pushing uphill forever and a day.
Let's talk talk about priorities because I think one of my favourite things is to remember, there's a difference between time and priority. A lot of people use the time excuse when actually something isn't really a priority.
Yeah.
So when we go into the third pain point, we're talking essentially about these prioritisation, let me get that out, ping pong. So how can we stop this going back and forth? Because obviously it's perception, right? And what I think is important may not be as important to you. So how do we deal with this, and what's this pain point that we're all feeling?
Well, you start your week and you've got your priorities, you've got certain things that you've got, even your day, you've got certain things that you absolutely have to get through. And so you sort of naturally, as humans, we sort of organise things in our own mind and prioritise. And I guess we could have called this pain point queue jumping, because there are so many people in most organisations, and it's a dynamic environment. There are things happening. There are, you're dealing with humans. That's the problem, and humans are generally not very organised. And so it might be your boss or the boss of another department suddenly comes to you and say, "I need this by close of business today. Can you just drop everything? This is now the priority." And it's like, well, I've got other priorities. So I think it's a pain point that most marketers can this sort of just constantly shuffling sort of list of priorities, but they're not always just your priorities. The other people are just jumping in and imposing their priorities on you.
And there's this whole concept of by COB today. Before we get into this, just a question from Catherine. So just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, to type them in. So Catherine said, "I get the whole issue with prioritisation, and it does come up quite frequently. However, how do you combat this with people asking from the entire organisation?" So this is even bigger. It's not just people from the marketing team. We've got people from different departments saying this.
Yeah, and I think, again, it comes down to a lack of visibility of what the marketing team is working on. Because it's just to send it to marketing. They'll do you a brochure, they'll do you a flyer, certainly a flyer in a day. I mean, it's just a flyer, a couple of pictures and a couple of lines of text.
Just get it up.
So I think, if you've got visibility over what the marketing team is doing, if you can see what's in their queue, if everybody in the organisation, I know that's a bit of a pipe dream at some, in some organisations, especially big organisations, but I think if you've got that lens of this is what they've got on their plate, people might hesitate before they ask, or they might at least understand that there's a notion of a queue, and the jobs actually have to join a queue and they have to be allocated, and that, Simon's on holiday this week and I can see that Mary's got her plate absolutely full. So I think visibility for me, Sarah, is the solution. And,
so if I was Mary, for example, and this probably goes back to pain point one, having that calendar or that one place of, that source of truth where you can have everything there, but don't just have that within the marketing team, actually filter that throughout the entire organisation.
Absolutely. And the entire organisation don't all need to be, having access to whichever system that you're using or Mary's using, but they need visibility over that system. So
we don't want people to get in there and start playing with stuff.
Absolutely.
A word that I'm actually quite sick of, but I know that it exists, collaboration. So I think it's important that we talk about the chaos that collaboration can sometimes make happen, because I think a lot of the times there's this whole thing of, we need to collaborate, but we don't know how, but we're not communicating, but then we forget, and we've got these emails going back and forth. So what is this pain point relating to?
Look, I think email is the biggest culprit, and email is not going to go away anytime soon. We're seeing new collaboration tools enter the workforce, and certainly into the marketing team. Trello, Slack, those kind of tools, which people are resonating with people because they realise it's just easier than email, and you don't have information falling between chairs. But the collaboration on a marketing assignment or a campaign or a job where you've got 10 people copied in on an email, and nobody's really, a lot of those people are only paying, attention out of the corner of their eye to that email. It comes through there. Very often they're not reading it. And so that's where the problem really happens. And that could be, at an approval level. It could be at I thought John was doing this was going to go and source the stock imagery. I thought, Julie was going to write the text. So it's just chaos, and that is reflective of so many marketing teams around the world, where their email is still the primary source of communication, especially in the world we live in today, where you've got people working from home and working remotely and in other countries, and so.
You picked up here on a workflow management tool, so can you just elaborate on what that is, or even how that would work within a marketing team?
Yeah, look, a workflow management tool is so let's say you've got that central eye, that central lens, central source of truth on what's going on. So campaigns and jobs are being briefed into this central system, and then tasks are being allocated just by at tagging people. So at tag John Smith, at tag Mary Mika, at tag whoever, and they are basically then notified by email that they've been assigned to a job. And then as the team manager, you can then see exactly what people are doing, who's working on what, how much they've got on their plate, and you can track the progress of that job all the way through, from briefing through to execution, delivery, and then approval. Certainly, from my experience, I couldn't imagine running any marketing team without this kind of tool. Being able to see what because I used to run marketing teams without that visibility, and then when you suddenly can see everything from a central perspective, it's like you've been groping around on the stage in the dark, and then somebody switches the stage lights on. It's like, oh my god, it's like the first time you saw a Google Analytics report. It's like, oh man, that's awesome. So I think for me that's absolutely critical, and being able to communicate who's doing what, when's it got to go out the door, show me what's late, show me what's in my, I think that for me,
I think what I'm picking up is we have to stop going around and trying to chase all this information. We need to have it there, don't we? And I think that feedback loop is incredibly important. And just on that, we're at the halfway mark now, but as we get towards the end, please fill out your feedback in the survey. Speaking of feedback, see what I did there?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about rules, because we all have rules there for a reason. We don't like to break them. Some of us like to sort of sway on either side of them. But this whole approval thing with legal and compliance, and this is when we're really talking about different departments within the organisation. Some people do just make up the rules as they go, and as a marketer, it can be quite frustrating, because it's like, oh God, how can we just get this done? So can you talk a little bit about this, and especially dealing with those legal, risk and compliance departments?
Look, it's the age we live in, isn't it? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute with approvals. But unfortunately, and again, marketers, it's not just the people outside the marketing department, it's people inside the marketing department who very often make up the rules. I mean, I've worked with people who are, have sent an email to 20,000 people, and when you say, but, Susan, why did you do that? It's like, there are rules. Oh, look, I was rushing out the door. I had to go and pick up my kids from kindy. And it's like, you can't do that, So, look, the reality is, this reality is not going to go away. Rules are going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. So it's just, as marketers, we've just got to accept them, accept that fact. But how do we make it easier to sort of manage around those rules and work within, swim in our swim lanes, if you like. So I think job templates are having those job templates are one of the key sort of key solutions to this. And again, that central system where everybody works in the same, everybody swims in the same swimming pool, even if they're in their lanes. They're all in the same. They're all in the big pool. They're all in the 50-meter pool. You haven't got people swimming off in the kids' pool and the 25-meter pool. They're all there. And then just that visibility over workflows, I think, is absolutely critical. It's so as a team manager, you can see what's going on and what's not going on in some cases.
Definitely that visibility piece. Okay, so number 6, the police, the pole. So here we're sticking to the theme of rules here, and you're always going to have those people who are sticklers for process, and you're going to have those people who don't necessarily do follow the processes. So, the fact that we understand that is probably a good starting point, that we do have 2 different types of people in this world and in your teams. But, this is obviously a pain point for marketers. And why do you think it is such a big pain point?
Oh, look, again, it's that left brain, right brain thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the process police have been after me for years, Sarah. I mean, they've had wanted, my team, it's like wanted, literally wanted posters, Rob Brown, for not following process. And it's just like, I know I've got to log into the system every morning, and I know I'm supposed to be, and it's like, but I've always been used to doing it on email. I've always been,
like we said at the beginning, we've got all these different shiny tools and all these different, like how many passwords do you have to log into something on a daily basis?
Of course.
And you just make them all the same, and then you get in trouble for having the same passwords, and there's always all these processes.
Don't introduce another screen in my life.
Okay,
I've already got like 4 screens, 5. That's about as much as I can manage. It's like the apps on your phone. You use 3 or 4 apps, maximum 5. Most people, even though they've got 60 or 70 on their phone. It's the same with all your marketing tools. Just keep it. Minimize the amount of screens. So I think this comes back to these campaign playbooks that you can, the templates that you can just go to. So just make it easy. Take out friction. Take out steps. If you can take out steps and make it easy for me, then it's more likely that I'm going to follow the process, and the process police will get off my back. Because, as I say, I'm the biggest culprit of this. And I think a lot of marketers can relate to this out there. It's just let me create, let me come up with, I don't want to be following the process. But we have to. We work we work with other departments, and there are more and more marketers who are much more process driven today, and have come from a much tighter sort of education system where this is you're not allowed to do that. You've got to follow process, and now you're collaborating in a much bigger team.
Okay, so conscious of the fact that a lot of this stuff has to come from the top down, and if you're at the top and you're not doing it, then obviously it's not going to. What's this point number 3 here, where we talk about champions, a champions program or super users? Is that sort of creating this tribe and recognising people's skills and getting them to sort of become the police? Yeah,
look, I mean, a police is probably the wrong word, because we shouldn't need, if our systems are set up properly, we shouldn't need the police, okay? And in every marketing team, whether you're a team of 3 or you're a team of 53, there's always somebody who is good at this. Okay, and I think identifying that person, and it might be somebody who's been in the team for 6 months. It might be somebody who's been there who is just super reliable, super organised. That's your champion. And I think and it's definitely not necessarily the head of the team. Okay, and again, I think a lot of people on this webcast can relate to that. It's like, my boss is terrible at that, or I'm terrible at that. But there's always somebody in the team who is much, much better at it than most of the others, and that's your champion. So I think giving them the license to come up with a process, come up with training, whatever, is one of the keys to success.
And they'll thrive with that, won't they? Yeah, more often than not. Okay, the Department of Business Prevention. Now, I want to be careful that we don't get too many people offside when we talk about this, depending on who we are talking to. So, this is where we're really talking about your blockers and your bottlenecks, aren't we? So, I think in the past we've defined, the blocker as that colleague who's always flat out on an urgent project and everything's really, really urgent, but then you can never pin them down on any detail. And then you've got also the people or the CMO who tells you that they'll get back to you by the end of the day. Then they go to a conference, they don't approve anything, and you're just sitting there going, oh my God, what is happening? This person's a massive bottleneck. So I think we've all been there at least once in our time, and probably other departments have as well. So this is a pain point. What can we do? We obviously need these legal and risk compliance teams, but what do we do?
Look, I think by its very nature, marketing is market-facing. So it's the external sort of facade of the company, or a product that the company produces, or a service that the company. So it's, if you're sitting in the legal team, marketing is one of the big red flags. It's like, I need to keep a special eye on marketing,
it's like
and I need to, absolutely, and I need to pay more attention to what's going out the door, because we've been burnt before, and I got a slap on the wrist, and the CEO said, deliver someone's head on a platter, and so everybody's been burnt by this, so people are more and more careful. So, an approval request will go through the legal team and from marketing, and it's like, people just, naturally just sit on things, and it's like, let me think about that one for a couple of days. But from the marketing team's perspective, that doesn't work, because I've got to get this campaign to market. I've got to get this out there. So I think being able to identify your blockers and your bottlenecks is one of the keys. But having an approvals system where legal are notified, legal are also on notice that they need to approve this. This is not a verbal, I'm going to send you something. There's a chain of command, and in many cases there's a hierarchy. It needs to be approved by it might be the CEO second, or the managing director, and legal last, or it might be that legal need to approve it first, and then then there's a hierarchical sort of approvals process. If you've got a system like that that's streamlined, I think it's such a time saver. And from a marketing director's perspective or a marketing manager's perspective, it's just like, I know there's accountability on their front too, to get this approved and get it turned around quickly. And being able to report on that, how long did that take to approve? What's the average approvals time? I think, it gives you sort of an argument to take back to legal, or where, your boss in the marketing department who is the bottleneck, and just say, look, this is holding back the business.
And I guess stuff like this really does become so much bigger than what it is, because it impacts culture, and then that ties into brand, and then the market. Like, it's just like this vicious circle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And just on that, let's slowly segue into approval tennis, because I think this is also something, and love him or hate him, we all have our curious moments every now and then where we just chuck the racket, we've had enough, we're done with this, we just can't get anything through, it's going back and forth. So how does this sit with you? Have you had any experience in this, or am I asking?
Oh yeah, I mean, nightmare. And I think it comes back to that email thing as well. An approval request is sent off to 6 different people, all in the main 2 field on the email. People don't know, is Sarah going to approve this, or is Rob going to approve it? Or, I've seen so many examples of that, and it's just back and forth. Who's supposed to approve this? Can you please clarify, Rob, what what needs to be approved, or who on this list of 10 people that you've sent it to actually needs to approve it? So it's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I think, for me, Sarah, one of the keys is getting approvals off email. Again, because we've all experienced, who the hell approved this? I didn't see it, or how did that campaign, how did that flyer get into the market or into the newspaper without me signing off on it? You've used our old logo, now I've got to justify that upstairs to, up the tree to the CEO who wants my head on a platter. It's like, who approved it? Well, I sent the email, it was sent to 5 people. Information fell between chairs. So I think if you can move approvals off email, that's the biggest thing for me, and to do that, you need an approvals tool.
What I want to do now, we had a question come through about 20 minutes ago from Simon, and he's asking about data and the fact, what are our thoughts around big data and the fact that we've got so much to work with. So let's go into the data bit now, and I have been waiting to get to this to answer your question, Simon. And I think the biggest thing, is data becoming a dirty word because you've heard so much. It's like the whole collaboration thing. But a lot of the times we just want to know what we have, who clicked what, who did what, and then bring it all together. And talking back to that report that came out that we mentioned at the beginning, in there, one of the stats said that 64% of marketers actually say they don't have time to actually do anything with their data because they've just exported everything and there's stuff here, and everywhere. So back to Simon's question, what are your thoughts on data and how relevant is it today? And are we getting too caught up in the way that we're using it? And what are the pain points associated with data? Because I feel like there's a lot happening.
Well, I think if you look at the sales department in any organisation, the data metrics, on sales are so much clearer.
Just black and white.
It's that's my pipeline. That's my that's my number of opportunities. That's the percentage. That's the close. That's the close won, close lost, whichever CRM language you speak. So the sales metrics have always been much clearer. At the end of the day, there's a customer or there's a product sale that's happened at the end of the. With marketing, I think part of the problem when it comes to data, Sarah, is that there's never been a consensus on what marketing metrics should should be.
Yeah.
And so how do you measure the marketing department? And we've been, I think, distracted with a lot of vanity metrics like Google Analytics. And suddenly marketers can go into the website and they can pull out a report which has got some really pretty graphs, which are then presented to the C-suite or to the management team. And, you know, as the CEO, and you would probably be the same, it's like, what the hell has, you know, time on site got to do with the sales? At the end of the day, I'm interested in sales. I'm not interested in these vanity metrics. So I think we've been barking up the wrong tree, to be honest, when it comes to data and marketers in many cases. And I think if you can define what the marketing team actually does, and then you can report on it, and you report on the amount of stuff going through the team. Most people in most organizations have no idea of the volume of stuff that's going through a marketing team. But the marketing team, as I said at the start, has never been able to really define what it does. Well, we do brochures and we do flyers. No, you do a lot more than that. And to put a brochure together or an EDM together, there are all sorts of components. So I think for me, and to answer Simon's question, the problem is around definition of what the marketing department does. And I think we need a paradigm shift, to coin a cliche, on what metrics are important. And if I'm managing a team of 40 people, so I've got 40 salaries as a line item on the, you know, on the P&L, you know, what do these people actually do? And I think if we can define that, then we can get to, you know, get to a point where marketing becomes much more credible.
So
I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea that you guys did that. You guys even do the annual report. I didn't know that, you know? Oh, I thought it came from just the sky. You know?
I think, is there, you know, some truth to the fact that we've almost shot ourselves in the foot because we have this stuff there, but we've never actually communicated not only the metrics that we need, but also the so what, who cares? It's like, I can give you all these numbers, but what does this actually mean and how does this impact the bottom line? Is that what we need to do to sort of just strip it all back, make sure we've got those metrics, make sure we know what we're communicating, but then also tell people why that's important?
Yeah, again, Sarah, I think if you can identify 2 or 3 key metrics, that's really important. But again, it comes the problem. It's not going to change the fact that sales is at the front of the queue. Marketing stands behind them, and the first thing the head of any company is going to look at is the sales metrics. It's like, how are we tracking this month, this quarter? Because I got to report to the shareholders or the market or whatever. And so I think that problem is not going to go away. But there are so many key marketing, like really sort of actionable insights that marketers can pull out of the tools that they currently use. Even, you know, like metrics like lead score, for example. Lead score, if it means something, can be a super powerful metric for the sales team. Knowing at what point somebody, you know, a marketing qualified lead is likely to turn into a customer based on their aggregate lead score. You know, that's the kind of thing.
What are your top 3?
Lead score would definitely be one of them. I think the number of jobs that, you know, the output of the team, I think is another one, definitely. Another key metric? Yeah, I mean, I think the turnaround time on jobs is really, you know, the productivity of the marketing team. What do these guys do? They're working faster and faster, and their output is greater and greater. I think those are the kind of metrics that I really, you know, home in on. Yeah.
Okay, so we're up to number 10. Now, we all have this fear. How important is it to make sure that we have something there to sort of, you know, make sure there's none of this blame game? Because I feel like there's a lot of that happening. It's all about, you know, this person's blaming this person. There's people disagreeing. There's no single source of truth. So let's go through number 10.
Oh, look, I mean, everyone can relate to this. And everyone
no matter if you're a marketer or not, right?
Because everybody's literally covering their proverbial. And And that's just the culture of blame, the culture of compliance that we live in. That's not going to that's not going to go away. It's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And so I think, you know, it comes back to visibility, accountability. It's like, I can sleep at night, you know. Anybody who's, you know, working in a marketing department where there are, for example, EDMs going out to large lists of people, You know, most of the managers of those departments, those marketing managers, you know, have nights where they wake up in the, you know, in a cold sweat and go, oh my God, what about if, you know, Barbara or John sends it to the wrong person?
Yep.
And why do we feel like that? Because it's happened before. So I think if you've got a central source of truth, that marketing lens that is, you know, you're comfortable that you're in control of your team. Okay, you can see what's going on.
Yep.
You sleep easier at night. And so for me, that is the solution, just having that visibility.
Yep.
Whereas you walk in, you've got a marketing team working there, and you don't have visibility of what over what they're doing. And I think that is where the fear of, you know, those proverbial F-ups come from.
Yeah.
So for me, that really is the key. And I've had that before and after experience where you've worked in that environment where you had no visibility, and then you've worked in a team where you had not complete visibility because you can't see what everyone's working on or browsing on there, but you can see the progress of jobs. You can see that workflow. You can see what's going out the door. You can see what's late. You can see who's got capacity. And for me, that's a critical thing.
Okay, so we're up to number 10 now. We've got a bonus one, and I think this one is something that just wraps everything up as a whole. I think, you know, we've all heard about this whole arts and crafts thing in the past, and the fact that we have to actually justify what we do as marketers. You know, speaking to Barbara, this is a situation that Barbara or most of us find ourselves in. You know, it's all about having that nice PowerPoint at the end. It's all about, okay, guys, we actually do more than just animations and PowerPoint. So before we get to questions, and we've got some coming through now, so please type the rest in. Let's just wrap this all up. And, you know, what does this mean? How can we get away from it? And, you know, what are your final thoughts on this whole topic?
I know so many CMOs and marketing directors and marketing managers who, instead of leading the team and inspiring the team, spend their lives sitting in steering committee meetings and committee, you know, departmental meetings, just showing and telling via a PowerPoint presentation that somebody spent 5 hours putting together once a week or once a month. I mean, some organisations do this every week, Sarah. It's just like, this is what we're working on this week, and here's my beautiful PowerPoint presentation. And they spend their lives just reporting on what their team's doing. And I think that is a fundamental flaw of the system in which so many of us find ourselves operating. So I think for me, you know, visibility is the key, and getting those metrics right, Sarah. It's what do the marketing team actually do, okay? And if you can define that and then report on it, and provide access to those reports in an accessible, you know, nice-looking dashboards with meaningful metrics, then I think you're going to bring a whole heap of credibility back to the marketing department.
Yep. And once again, I think it's just that visibility, isn't it? Having that visibility, having access, instant, and removing that need for that whole show and tell, and just having access to something, and then we can start doing, as opposed to just talking about it without doing that. Okay, well, that brings us close towards the end. What I want to do before we get to questions is just refer people to complete the feedback survey if you do need to leave. Also refer down to the resource tab. We've got some great resources in there for you to take a look at, including our blog, which is full of insights, interviews, and some very interesting reads from some other fellow marketers that we've spoken to in the past. Also, if anyone is interested in looking for a single source of truth that removes complexity from your organisation and makes you feel completely in control and more effective, look no further than Simple. There's also a link in the bottom of the resources, and take a look at that, because the whole idea is to help everyone out there plan, create and optimise everything they're currently doing. There's a sales pitch, but as we go forward to the questions, keep them coming. We do understand some of you do have to leave, but if you do complete the survey in the feedback tab, we will actually send you a copy of the recording so you can forward it on to your teams, or send it to your CEO to sort of justify everything that we've just spoken about. So we do have some questions now. So the first one is from Christine. So Christine, do you have any advice on sales and marketing alignment? This is also a big one that has come up recently. So, you know,
and there are so many people who've attempted to answer this question. I think, again, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's it's like you've got one department that speaks Greek and another that speaks Spanish, and they don't trust each other because there's no visibility over the, particularly I think, and I've sat on both sides of the fence and I'm involved on both sides of the fence, but I think particularly the sales, the sales guys look at marketing and they go, you guys just, you get in our way rather than enable us. And, the leads you're throwing over the fence are no good, and that's why, that's putting pressure on us. We're not going to hit our target. We're not going to hit our bonus, So I think and I think, coming from, I've done a lot of work in the marketing automation space, and it's the same, again, what do marketing actually do? And I think comes down to that visibility, those metrics. As I mentioned, one of my favorite metrics is lead score done well. And interesting moments, those kind of things that sales guys just go, oh my God, marketing actually do something. Who set this up?
Yeah, wow, where did this come from?
So I think the alignment between sales and marketing, look, we all know as well as marketers, and everybody on this webcast knows that, marketing, the customer or the prospective customer is needing to speak to sales a lot later in the process, if at all in some cases, and that marketing's sort of share of that funnel, if you like, to coin another marketing cliche, is getting larger and larger and larger. So I think there's going to have to be, there is going to have to be more alignment, but I think visibility, if sales could see what marketing we're working on, just as if the CEO could see what marketing would work on, they would maybe hold back from criticizing, go, I didn't know you guys were even, we just thought you guys were always out at lunch and always, making pretty pictures and pretty brochures. So I think for me, that's the thing. Let them into your systems. Yeah. Show them your systems.
Got nothing
most marketers
to hide.
can see Salesforce.
Yeah.
Most marketers have a login to Salesforce. Yep. They can see the pipeline, but the sales guys can't see what marketing are doing. So I think for me, that's the key.
Final question from Evelyn. We've got 60 seconds to go. So I understand there are platforms like this available, like you just mentioned. What is the minimum amount of team members that you need to actually put in something like this?
Oh, look, at a minimum level, I would say around about 5. Yep. At a minimal level. But it's not, I was talking to somebody yesterday who said, we've only got one product. Do we need a system like this? I was saying, you've got one product, but you advertise in all these channels. You've got a hell of a lot of campaigns going out the door for this one product. So I don't think it's so much about team size. It's about efficiencies and time saving. But 5, I would say, to answer the question, is the minimum that I would,
There you go. You heard it from the man himself. Thank you, Rob. I think, if anything, the 3 key things that I've picked up today has been visibility, feedback and communication. So much like life, I think you need those 3 things to make it all happen, don't you? Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today. We hope to see you at future events. Please complete the survey and keep a lookout for the recording. Bye for now. Thank you.